Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jemimah from GIZ, working within the e-mobility and renewable energy topics at GIZ. I would like to give context to this panel session where it's accelerating e-mobility through C&I, which comes at a crucial time in Kenya. And we are exploring innovative ways to strengthen the grid reliability. So throughout the sessions, we've seen that C&I players are no longer just energy consumers, but they are also energy producers, system balancers, and enablers of clean mobility. So now this panel will explore vital parts of the evolving landscape, how captive power and decentralized energy systems present new opportunities for e-mobility.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Mboa Nyandwaki. I serve at Nights and Apps Limited, also Drive Electric. At Drive Electric, I serve as a COO. The activities that we mainly do is solar as our core business. Then there is e-mobility, where we deal with the taxi fleet, charging infrastructure, and currently we're also focusing on the end life of the batteries by repurposing them.
Hi everyone, my name is Bertha Mvati. I work with Basigo Limited. We do public transport. We currently have 50 buses on the road in Kenya. We've got 6 buses in Rwanda and another 28 to be deployed in the next 2 weeks. And I'm happy to be here.
My name is Alex Sangonda Mboa. I work with the Kenya Bureau of Standards. At Kenya Bureau of Standards, our mandate is to develop and implement standards. I am a principal standards officer, currently managing a number of technical committees. I think 2 of them might be of interest to this particular gathering. First one is CREP's TC92, which deals with renewable energy and energy management standards, and CREP's TC191, which deals with e-mobility standards. On top of that, I'm also the National Secretary of the Kenya National Committee of IEC, and here my role is to coordinate electrotechnical stakeholders and develop the Kenyan position so that when we participate at international standardization forums, we are able to represent the country and give a national position with respect to developing electrical and electronics standards for electrical and electronics equipment. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Musonye. I work for EPRA. I'm the Deputy Director in charge of energy efficiency and conservation. I'm sure many people have been on this stage talking about EPRA since morning, so I may not reintroduce what EPRA does. I'm also, you can also find me in Strathmore University, where I teach. I teach energy transition there, Multimedia University, and in a number of consulting activities across the continent in energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Ignatius Maranga. I am a researcher and engineer at Strathmore University. I work at the Energy Research Center in the university. And Strathmore University is one of the universities, but then we have an Energy Research Center which does training, capacity building in renewable energy systems, emerging technologies. We also have consultants or do consultancies and research activities in renewable energy and emerging technologies. And we also have a testing lab where we test equipment. We're also members of the technical committees at KEBS. I am a member of Technical Committee 91 on electrical installation standards and 199 on e-mobility. Thank you.
Okay, let's get started. So, Nights and Apps, I'll direct this question to June. Knights and Apps has been at the forefront of deploying EV infrastructure, and also Knights has been a pioneer in the e-mobility sector. Can you tell us how captive solar has helped so far to ensure reliability and cost-effective charging for your customers?
Okay, thank you. So to start with, when you talk about captive solar, we have two sides. There's the grid side and then the solar. So initially, when anybody installs a solar panel, the main thing is to ensure you save the energy you are drawing from the grid. So what has happened when we started with the solar, we have clients and systems that already are under solar and are able to save. So when you bring in the EVs, currently they work with the solar when it's during the day, and actually with the availability of the EV vehicle. So that means if it is at 9 or 10, I'm able to charge from solar. But past 6 hours, when the sun hours are out, you're not able to use again the solar. So what is currently remaining in our transition and innovation from the research department is how to include the storage so that our EVs are also able to still charge using the captive power that was stored during the day from the solar. Another illustration where we use now captive solar without engaging the grid completely is when we've set up charging stations, and an illustration is in Lodwar, whereby we use repurposed batteries from the EV to store the energy from solar during the day and still use the same solar to charge up batteries for swapping for two-wheelers. So that has worked, and it has shown us that indeed we are able to use solar fully for that kind of situation for the two-wheelers, and also during the day when there is availability of that specific EV for the four-wheelers. But in the evening, still we are looking for a way of enhancing by implementing now the energy storage aspect. Thank you.
And I'll direct this question to Engineer Fenwicks. How does e-mobility fit into the Kenya's broader industrial energy strategy, especially the context of renewable energy integration?
When you look at the energy policy, I'll start from the policy first, because you start the policies, then you go to the act, the regulations, then the strategies. So the energy policy has cascaded down to two policy instruments. I'll talk of the NDC, the nationally determined contributions. The last time we sent the contributions to UNFCCC was in 2020, where we were committing to decarbonize the industries and transport. So that fits in there in terms of talk of C&I, even EVs. They both fall into the issue of decarbonization of the industry, where we're trying to move away from the carbon element of the power supplied to the industries. The number two is changing the fleet. Of course, now the NDC went down, and from it we developed the next Kenya National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Strategy. That strategy has a target of having 5% EVs by 2025. So I know it's 2025, and someone will ask me if my mentee here is laughing. So 2025. And they say, if you want to go to the moon, you aim at the sun. But maybe to surprise him, by 2023, the number or the portion of EVs that were sold that year, 1.62% was EVs, just generally. That's a report that was done, I think, last year. 1.62, that's by 2023. So probably if you check today, we could be having maybe it's more than 3. And it was also seen that there was exponential growth of EVs by that year. I don't like using that word exponential without adding a number there. So there was growth by 45%. So that you compare what was bought in 2020 and 2023, there was a drastic shift into that. And of course, that's one of the reasons, one of the results of the policy shift. Another policy shift that was there was, of course, in terms of the EV charging tariff. I know you'll ask me if it's effective. I may not answer that question. I want to preempt that. But of course, there were preferential tariffs for EV, which is a good sign. It may not be materially maybe beneficial, but then it's a good sign of government building trust in the EV. So those are some of just the policy instruments that are around in terms of strategies and conventions like the NDC that are assisting towards that. And thank you very much, Jemimah.
Maybe a follow-up questions. Throughout these earlier sessions, we've seen that net metering regulations and open access regulations are also part of the enabling framework. How do you see this presenting opportunities for EV charging operators and C&I players?
That's one very good transition, so to speak, into in the energy transition space. One is because for net metering, those people who are fearing that they may not be in a position to fully utilize their intermittent power plants, then of course they have no cause to worry, because they can bank it to the grid and then get it back, or they net it off at the end of the month. So net metering regulations are very useful in as far as the grid is used as the battery storage for that, for C&I. So if you're having C&I and the C&I is solar, you know, C&I could be something else, but it's solar. Okay, if it's solar, then we have somewhere we can bank the power. Number two, in terms of net meter, in terms of open access, and it's a problem we were trying to explore with the Ignatius here and Professor Da Silva and Safaricom sometimes back. You can really shift your generation. So it's not necessary that now your C&I must be there and then where you're producing. You can produce your power from a different, some remote site. Then you wheel that power to your station, maybe 10 kilometers, maybe 12 kilometers. Then you can use it. So how is this useful, by the way? It's because it's easy to generate power from where resources are. Now we'll be hearing of C&I for geothermal or C&I for wind. So because I can go a very remote location, I generate, then I wheel the power to my station. So those two regulations will be very useful. They are in themselves actually an incentive towards adoption of the renewable energy. Thank you.
We've seen now NDCs, how energy policy and the enabling policy frameworks like the NDCs, energy efficiency and conservation strategies, and how net metering are playing a crucial role as a supporting environment for e-mobility. But now on the ground, what does this mean for large fleet operators like Basigo who are pushing boundaries? And this now question goes to Bertha. We've seen that Basigo has been the largest consumer of energy through nighttime charging. What policy changes that are in place could help accelerate e-mobility adoption in the industry sector, especially for businesses like yours, and also regarding incentives for businesses adopting e-mobility? Thank you.
Thanks, Jemimah. I think I'll start with the e-mobility tariff, as just mentioned a few minutes ago. So 3 years ago when we were starting, there was no e-mobility tariff. So I agree with engineer here, where somewhere at least we have an e-mobility tariff. We are heading in the right direction. But the first place would be to look at this e-mobility tariff and make some adjustments or some reforms to it. So the first one that would push for from a large fleet or a large consumer would be the limit. It has a limit of 15,000 units. With the fleet we currently have, we utilize 15,000 units in 2 days. So then it's not helpful for us. So that would be the first place. And that is with 50 units. We currently have 24 units under manufacture that will be out in the next few weeks. So we do need the tariff to be looked at, some reforms to be done to it. That would be the first place. Second place I would look at is in terms of charging and infrastructure. 80% of our charging is done during the night, and then we do about 20% during the day. So with what we're using the day or with any consumption during the day, CNI solar would work. It's just that what happens during the night in terms of storage. So you cannot invest in doing a whole grid, solar grid, and you're only going to use a percent of it. So would government be looking to come in to invest in terms of storage, battery storage, where then people who are producing in the grid can store and then utilize it later on? The other thing in terms of battery storage, again, the costs are high. You look at duty, standalone batteries attract a duty of 35%. So if government is able to give some incentives around reducing the duty on batteries, then the storage option can also be explored a bit more easier. The other thing I'd give to government, again, when it comes to charging and infrastructure, building the charging and infrastructure, we've noticed that there has been issues in terms of getting land or places where we can invest and put charging stations. So currently we have 4 charging stations. We have another 4 that are under construction. But if you look at the lead time that it takes just to secure the land and start the construction, it takes quite a bit of time. So the challenge I would throw here is to the county government and to the national government. You could avail some land, do some public private partnerships where you're availing land and you're saying, okay, here is the land, then you can go ahead and do the infrastructure and we can do the building of the charging infrastructures. Another thing that I can look that can help the industry is the cost that is associated with actually putting up the charging infrastructures. So currently we have to purchase the transformers. If we are to move, that's a sunk cost because it's not our property. So maybe we can see how we can partner where the government is then, or the regulator is giving us the transformers and what is required, because it's still their property. It's still going towards building up their grid. So I think those are the key ones that I would put emphasis on.
And that brings me to the question I will pose for CREPs, that is Alex. CREPs has recently developed the EV charging infrastructure standards. And obviously there are challenges within the industry, especially safety aspects. I would like to ask you what challenges in expanding charging infrastructure for C&I users, and how do we overcome these challenges, and what role do the standards play in this context?
Thank you for that. I think it flows well. One of the challenges has already been, 2 have already been addressed. I will piggyback on them. I think there is the issue of the tariff, and then there is also the issue of conventional land rates from the government. Those are some of the challenges which have already been spoken about. When it comes to the EV charging infrastructure as well, you normally have the issue of clarity, regulatory clarity. This is what standards bring in, and in absence of such, you find that investors are averse in putting their money into the business because they don't know how the environment will look in tomorrow in the future. So when you have standards in place, it helps clarify the environment, and also now gives the investors confidence. On the other hand, I think the other people might argue that based on the stage of the industry in Kenya, then it might not be the right stage to have the regulations. They are of the opinion that you let the industry grow, then the standards will develop organically. That's the other side of the argument. But for a sector like transportation, which is very key to the economy, it will be, in my opinion, not wise to leave it under self-regulation. And why am I saying this? Because in this sector, you find that probably the needs of the consumers and the businesses are not aligned. And you might find that every other business in the EV charging infrastructure might try to promote a particular technology or a particular charger, and then you end up having a series of charging infrastructure that is incompatible, and then it makes the charging infrastructure less accessible, which has a downside effect to the adoption of the e-mobility in the country. Of course, there is also the bigger overriding factor about administrative barriers, I think, which comes into play as well. When we are talking about the hurdles the players have to go through, especially when it comes to the licensing and permitting. And here is an area where standards can bring in a little bit of clarity, because the various actors or regulators will know what is required. At least it's already in play. For example, I think last week we are trying to bring on board the requirement for EV charging as part of the electrical installation. So they be part of our electrical installation requirements. And the key discussions that came, or the key take that came from that particular workshop we had, was that making the regulators aware about, for example, the safety requirement the charging infrastructure has to comply with, can help at least in a way fasten the process, because if EPRA here is the one that is giving licensing, because essentially an electrical charging equipment is just an electrical equipment that is dispensing electricity, so it has to comply with the regulations on electrical installations. For them, what they need is an auditing criteria. How do they determine whether this particular charging installation is safe? And then it's safe, because then you have to have the standards that gives requirements that have to be met. For example, if in case of a fault, is there an equipment that automatically disconnects the supply so that to ensure the safety of the users of this particular charging infrastructure? And then there is also the issue of reliability. For you as a business, you want continuity of supply. And one key thing that standards give is they give an assurance of fitness for purpose. So how reliable is that particular equipment in meeting the intended purpose? So in this regard, I think we have developed a number of standards. Some of them are still in the process. The ones that we have, they touch on the charging system, the AC and DC charging system. A good example is the IEC 61851, Part 1, which talks about, just gives the general requirement for EV charging equipment supply equipment. And then Part 23 of that particular document also now gives the requirement for DC, what we normally call the fast chargers. Then there are other standards that address the plugs that you'll be able to use, plugs and connectors, because for example, mode 1, a charger will go up to 16 amperes, that's the current it draws from your socket outlet. But now, using the normal socket outlets, which are rated at 13 amperes, you see that you'll have a problem. That's why for the EV charging now, you'll have to use plugs and socket outlets that meets a particular standard, which is the IEC 61926 series, which gives the requirement for those particular plugs. The other particular thing that we noted was on home charging as well, if I can say that. And here, for the country, we are trying to discourage the mode 1 charging, whereby you just connect, unless it's the scooters where the current that is drawn is less than a maximum of 10 amperes. But above that, then you need to have a dedicated circuit that supplies to your charger, and then you can be able to charge. And that charger or equipment or circuit has to be protected by, for example, a residual current a device for the safety of the users. In case there is an at fault, then you are protected. So in short, standards play a key role in actually giving the users confidence in the safety and reliability of the EV charging infrastructure. And if well implemented, then they can also spur the growth of the e-mobility sector, because some people ask which comes first. Is it the vehicles or the EV charging infrastructure? There's a causality problem there. Though some researchers agree that you can address it from both sides. Either side can be able to drive the growth of the e-mobility. So by having the standards, you'll be able to give people a confidence that the charging infrastructure is safe, is reliable, and you also provide clarity to investors that if they are investing, for example, their money, then we don't wake up tomorrow and say, okay, now we are changing, we are mandating this particular charger or connectors as the new requirement in Kenya. So that kind of clarity helps bring in money into the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for putting things into perspective. Indeed, we are anticipating challenges within the expansion of EV charging infrastructure. Obviously, regulatory clarity should tie in with the needs of the consumers and the operators, and definitely standards are the invisible backbone that will support the system. But then, as we speak about expansion, we must ask ourselves, is the grid ready? Are we ready for what's coming? That is the adoption of EV. And thus, I pose this question to Ignatius. From your perspective, how prepared is the Kenya grid infrastructure for large-scale EV adoption? And what infrastructure upgrades are necessary to ensure a smooth integration of electric vehicles?
Thank you, Jemimah. I was noting in most of the discussions and comments from the members of the panel, as most actually touch on, although in different perspectives from the question, and this question is quite complex, whether the grid is ready for EV adoption. The answer is yes and no, depending on how you look at it. So first, because the grid is the most complex machine that exists, complex because of the number of nodes and the interconnectivity and how large scale it is, right? Because first you have the generation system, then you have the transmission system and the distribution system. And now with further unbundling, you have the system operator, you have the retailer, right? So if you look at it from a high level perspective, from a generation perspective, which most policymakers will look at, then the grid is ready for EV adoption. One, if you look at the EPRA statistics report that was released recently for 2024-2025, you'll see that we have a curtailment of about 236 gigawatt hours, right? This is for half of the year. And in some months, you have curtailment of up to 112, I think, gigawatt hours, right? And majority of this is coming from geothermal energy. And this curtailment is about 7% of the energy consumption we have now. When you look at e-mobility currently, Dr. Fenwicks explained it, we have an exponential growth. And the current number of EVs as at 2024 is at about 2% of the total registered vehicles we have, right? So this is about 10,000 EVs. Now, and with the 10,000 EVs, the consumption is about 0.4 gigawatt hours. So that was the highest in the month of November. And we've tried to do some projections on the growth of EVs. And with a growth where you have about 200,000 EVs, for example, the consumption is expected to be about 50 gigawatt hours. So as you look at it at the moment, we have enough supply. Now, so I've just talked about the generation perspective, but then you have the transmission and the distribution aspect. Now, with the transmission infrastructure, a lot of expansion is going on and reinforcement of the transmission network. First, it needs to reach different places. From the first presentation, you could see that the locations where we have generation is at a particular place, right? It's also expected that we'll have EV and high number of EVs at the same particular area. However, many people use transport all over the country, right? So this means that the infrastructure will need to be extended to where the consumers are, same as the distribution infrastructure. And so expansion is one of the key things that I think will need to be done in reinforcement. Then the other key aspect, which points out to a colleague from Basico, is the aspect of digitization. So, and I think has been spoken about around. So we'll need to have a digitized system where we can know now what is the current demand at this place. Do we need to add new infrastructure to this point? This is looking at transformers or the distribution lines or the transmission lines or whatever we have there. Is it enough to meet a certain demand of EVs? Now we don't have that at the moment, right? So you'll have to go to the utility with your consumption. They'll say they'll do an assessment. Most likely you'll be requested to purchase a transformer, like is the case for Basico. So you'll need to have this digitization where you have in real time, you can tell the growth and the demand and what kinds of reinforcement needs to be done in terms of transformers and the lines. And this will, of course, inform site selection and conductors and cables. I think that answers it in a snapshot. So yes and no.
Okay, you've heard from Ignatia that investment planning is critical in the expansion of distribution network, and digitization is actually very key. So yes and no, because also we are venting the geothermal resource at the moment, and we anticipate the growth on the generation side. We will be able to cover EV adoption. So I would like to open up to the audience.
When we look at the e-mobility solutions, in some parts of the world, we've seen situations where if you've got an electric car, you can actually use it as an alternate, battery for the house as a means, so that if there's an outage for whatever reason, then the car itself can actually feed back into the house and provide alternate power in that particular situation. So when I look at all these big buses chapping these laps, I imagine that if we had Kijijis just sitting around, that might be a possibility. Now, could you speak into, whether that's actually a possibility to hook up? Of course, I understand that to wake up in the morning and the bus should be fully charged, but I imagine that it would be one of those ways that we can actually provide community, that's a big storage pool on wheels that can be moved around to where it needs to be. So I don't know what your thoughts on those would be.
You do all of this charging. I take it that the battery life might not be too long. So what do you anticipate to do with your batteries 5 years down the road? So basically, how are you thinking about circularity?
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Muti from Equity Bank. I have three questions. One, are there any incentives in place for property owners to have charging infrastructure within their premises, such like probably malls and other places, so that probably are not entirely reliant on waiting for the KPLC or Kenyan or whoever is supposed to set up those infrastructure? But are there any plans to partner with property owners to have infrastructures within? Then two, I think the gentleman from Kent had mentioned it a bit. What are the plans to expand the infrastructure countrywide? At the bank, we're seeing increased queries about EVs and ourselves financing the same, and some queries are coming from as far as Kisumu, Eldoret, but what we're not clear about is the charging infrastructure. So I wanted to understand what are the plans for having infrastructure out of Nairobi. Then three, what are the EV standards whether there are any standards for second-hand vehicles coming in from outside, so that then we avoid dumping of vehicles within the Kenyan market. Thank you.
My name is Deccan Owino from NY Mobility. It's an electric mobility company. So my question goes to the engineer. In accelerating e-mobility through CSI, what are the direct impacts of bus, mass, and SaaS? So bus is battery, mass is mobility, and SaaS is software. And then also to the panel, where are we in the e-mobility policy? Thank you.
My name is Elijah Dwar from Electric Mobility Association of Kenya. And my question, I guess, goes to Bertha when she mentioned something to do with their buses currently consuming about 15,000 units in 2 days. And also mentioned that there are more buses coming into the pipeline. And the challenge would be when it comes to transformers, perhaps I think it's something that you're told to buy, that kind of thing. Would having electric mobility charging hubs solve that kind of problem, whereby now you have one single charging hub for most electric vehicles, and then with standardization now of electrical sockets, for example, also solve the problem for when it comes to charging, or rather having to spend so much in order to build or to acquire charging infrastructure.
Thank you for your questions. We'll begin by the question from the gentleman at the back on the vehicle to grid, how electric vehicles can power apartments when we have blackouts. I'd like Ignatius to answer this question.
Thank you. Well, that is a very interesting concept that is actually possible and being implemented. Well, trials are running and implementation is currently ongoing, but with tests in the developed world. I know developing world, developed countries. So I know the UK and Germany are actually doing some tests and studies and seeing how this is working. It's possible to do it here. However, like mentioned, some infrastructural requirements need to be done to the grid. First of all, you need to have a digitized system where you can tell where the demand is. The moment you have high demand, then I can tell now these vehicles are plugged in. For instance, in the UK, one of the standards is called PAS. That is a publicly available specification, which is not a standard yet, but the latest one of 2024 actually talks about some perspectives of vehicle to grid. And one of the things they're looking at is the moment you plug into the grid, then the system operator will tell that these are the number of vehicles plugged in. This is the battery storage capacity available. Then you might be requested to actually supply to the utility. So you will need digitization, of course, reinforcement of the infrastructure. You need to have transformers with enough capacity to take it in, lines as well from the distribution network all the way to the transmission network. But that's with regards to infrastructure. You'll also need regulations. Now we have open access and net metering regulations, which I assume will also be looking at the bidirectional movement of power. But then you'll need the implementation plan. Tariffs for this, because now you'll be using your batteries to supply to the grid. What tariff will apply? What effect does that have on the life of the battery? So it's a complex scenario, which I think, yes, we can get there looking at or learning lessons from other countries, but then I think it's we also need to do some work on the infrastructure that we have.
Anyone who wants to add on that? Then we will. The next question was for battery end of life that was posed to Basigo. Bertha.
All right. So on battery life, end of life, it's anywhere between 5 to 8 years, depending on how the bus is being operated and the kilometers it's covering. And what we're doing as Basigo, one is we are doing a list on the batteries because we want to have control on what happens to the batteries at the end. Purely one, we do not want any dumping happening because we'll be undoing everything we're trying to do in terms of impact and sustainability. So what we're looking at doing at the end is, we don't have it fully figured out, by the way, but for now we're looking at how we can repurpose them, either to use them for home charging, or how they can go into storage to help us in terms of what we're talking about, storing from the solar grid during the day. So we're still looking into it. We still have a few years to go, and by the time we get there, we're sure we'll have gotten the other answer.
So just to add to that, currently in our context, because I believe batteries, the lithium-ion batteries, we understand that 80% is what is actually available for us to use when the battery is new. And also when it's aging, it has not aged to zero, meaning it has about 40% to be used. It's just that it is not good for the road, so that because you'll keep on charging so many times. So it means you can either fully use it for storage, which we have samples used fully for storage, or you can break down the cell, the modules, and repackage. And then there is certification that we need to get from EPRA in terms of the new package that you have, which currently we've done samples, and then now you use it for home systems. That is currently what is happening. Still, it can store as much, because if it has powered a school, in my opinion, in Kikambala, it means still it's able to do as much as what the lithium ion can do, arguably, from different angles. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertha and June. So clearly, circularity is a conversation that is critical within the e-mobility sector. Yes, batteries can be repurposed for second life application, including stationary applications.
Most of the times when you talk about technology growth, be it green hydrogen, solar, C&I, everyone says the government should give money, should give. Maybe the thing we need to understand, one is if you talk of incentives, then we have the fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. If you go for the fiscal incentives, you might be meaning that they tax my mom in the village, then they make your business to grow, which, and our budget goes through parliament. So when you go to parliament, you really need to convince parliamentarians who pass the budget, and Gen Z, of course, who pass the budget, why you are giving incentives in a specific field, and probably you are not subsidizing education, or you're not subsidizing healthcare and all that. So yes, it's possible to have incentives, but not fiscal incentives, non-fiscal incentives. So you can have incentivization schemes, of course, where you can really help people. In other jurisdictions, it works. There is what you call the investment tax credit, ITC, which you use, and I think when you're paying your corporate tax, mostly in USA, they will remove that component of the investment tax credit, then it works. But then in Kenya, we are facing many problems, and that's from the government side, by the way. The government has so many problems it's trying to solve. So the government says that those who are able should try to help them solve those issues. So yes, there could be incentives, but then there will need to be a good economic justification for that. A good one. If you had to say, talk of property owners, probably you might have to tell someone how many are they in the country. Are they 1%? Are they 2%? Are they 3% of the population? Then do we justify why the population should come in to do that? And that brings me to the question of policy, because incentive schemes are functions of policies, and you need positive policy propositions. So when you talk about positive policy proposition, you need to give a specific number, you need to model, you need to give an optimal point where the entire society benefits. So, and when you talk of mostly non-fiscal incentives, there are always the problems of free rider problems. There's a problems where we misalign the intended beneficiary may not be getting that money, it gets lost in between, and all those sorts of things. So, of course, it's a very good balance, the way we are having the e-mobility tariff, but then you need to have a very good balance so that at any one time you may have to justify before Parliament, before Gen Z, and before God why a specific field might need to be incentivized, because we'll have that, we'll have green ammonia, we'll have someone else coming with his, then it becomes some sort of a big problem where you are throwing money at every problem or at any issue to try to make it grow up. So to ensure we are not stifling innovation, to ensure we are not stifling entrepreneurship, you need to let the market players to try to look at best ways of improving. the cost function of it, and all of it is by economy of scale. The more you have your products, the more you sell, the more the customers you are serving, the cheaper the cost, because you're going to reduce the fixed cost. Total cost is fixed cost plus operating cost. So the more the volumes I'm putting out there, I reduce the fixed cost, starts coming smaller and smaller, then the price, of course, goes low. But it's a possibility, yes. Fiscal incentives exist, but then they have to be rationalized quite radically. Thank you.
I'm aware of the building codes, which were passed in 2024, that actually require any new building coming up, residential buildings, commercial buildings, malls, to have a provision for EV charging infrastructure. So that was passed was gazetted, I think, in February 2024. And it's in place.
So aside from that, when you look at the direct benefits, for instance, the charging stations that we've installed in different property owners areas, the direct one will be the rental. You negotiate a good rental income so that your charger at the specific parking spots are paid for every month. Then you can also do a revenue share model based on the charger. If it is, let's say you invest in it and then you agree, I'll get this amount at the end of every month, depending on the charging sessions. So both of you try and attract traffic into that area so that you can gain as maximum. Then also you can look at other benefits that come by just having the charger in your premise. I've seen this in the Well Mall. We have other facilities that are there that have been promoted just as a result of drivers coming in to charge. So you can get, if let's say a school bus has come in and let's say the children go to the supermarket to do business, people are getting shaves as they wait for the vehicle to charge, because you're talking of 45 minutes to 1 hour. So if you look at it that way, it can also indirectly promote the other businesses. Currently, I can vouch for Naivasha. Naivasha, we have chargers. So it means if you're en route to Nakuru and you have a good vehicle that can do 200 and above kilometers, you're able to still charge there. But again, this question is being answered by the vehicles we're bringing in as suppliers. Vehicles that can do up to 300 to 380 kilometers. So we are currently working on that as a company also. And I've seen other players doing the same. So this will mean the charging infrastructure and also the respective vehicles complement each other. We also advocate for people to have home chargers in as much as there are guidelines of how, where you need to use them, the type of sockets you need to operate, so that at least there is no range anxiety over time.
The other question was on standards for second-hand vehicles. I don't know, Alex, could you try and address this?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good one, and somehow expected it. So for now, yes, we are doing something with respect to second-hand EV vehicles coming into the country. And the emphasis is on the state of health of the battery. So there's a requirement that it has to be at least 80%. So that's a start. I know there are other metrics that will give you a better indication of the quality of the remaining quality of the battery, but those ones have so far not been incorporated, and we are working to ensure that we develop other metrics and come up with a better criteria of evaluating the batteries for second-hand EV batteries. In addition to that, I think there is the standard for second-hand vehicles, the KS 1515, is currently out for public review. So it's being revised. So in case any of you has comments on the same, you can be able to submit the documents, the comments to us. And then there was also the issue of course, by AMAC on standards. I think they can help on making the charging network interoperable, so that you don't have to worry whether when you drive into a charging station, whether you'll be able to, your vehicle is compatible or with the charging equipment that have been installed. Then I can also add something on the second life use of batteries. IEC is currently having a project whereby they are using second life EV batteries to retrofit a number of PV installations in the country. So the project is called IEC, Global Impact Fund project. So far, they have retrofitted a number of schools, and the health centers, there should be total about 9 once the Kenyan edition of that project is done. What we'll be doing, we'll be monitoring how those particular batteries are performing because there is a monitoring a system in place. And the data that we'll be able to get from that project will also help in coming up with a framework for second life batteries in the country. For those who are interested, I think IEC they have a standard for that. If you can Google, there is IEC 63330. That one gives you some of the requirements you need to go through when you are using batteries for second life applications. Then I can chip in briefly on the question that was asked on vehicle to grid. I think that was a very good question. And how many of you guys have heard of virtual power plants? Yeah. So I think an ideal place for Kenya, I think the industry can explore is just aggregating. You can aggregate the EV charging demand. Then it's controlled from a central place. Then it can be able to reduce the impact on the grid. As you are aware, I think from the morning session is that the captive power is growing, which is raising concerns to the distribution network operator. So we need to come up with some innovative solutions. Those solutions are already existing elsewhere. I know Australia, I think they have done quite well with respect to virtual power plants and how they can be able to control or manage distributed energy resources. China is also at the forefront. I think if you remember in 2022, I think they had a heat wave, and the heat wave was that resulted in them curtailing the EV charging requirement, and then that one pushed them into exploring how they can be able to use the virtual power plants to manage the distributed energy resources. So as an industry, I think that is an idea we can borrow and see if it can be able to help solve some of the bottlenecks that we are experiencing. Our grid is quite small, and if we have like 600 megawatt of distributed energy resources, then you'll end up, sure you'll have problems if you don't manage it well.
Thank you, Alex, that was quite insightful. The other question was posed by Imak to Basigo that currently you're spending 15,000 units in 2 days. Is there an opportunity for charging hubs to evolve within our ecosystem?
Thanks. So if I got your question correct, it was if we can have one hub, and several hubs. Right. Yeah. So currently it's driven by the delivery and the demand. Yeah. And what we are doing, because we're in the PSV sector, it has to be as close as possible to the route where the bus operates. We don't want dead miles. So we have several hubs, but they have to be close to where the operations are. Yeah. And then the other question was there another question on standardization? Okay.
So there was also another question on e-mobility policy. Yes, the conversation began in 2023 where the task force was established. Ignatius was part of the task force, and it went through an extensive process for public participation. And do you want to add like where it is right now?
Okay, so thank you. So I also expected this question, but anyway, the policy was done, completed, submitted to the government, to the Ministry of Transport, but then there were discussions with the Treasury and the Attorney Generals, and I hear it was passed in Cabinet about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so then now it's going through the next processes, because now it's been passed in Cabinet, so I think it's a good step.
Yeah, it's a good step for Kenya, and we anticipate that the next steps will be, it will go through to the next stage, the Parliament, where the session paper will be drafted, and this will now be anchored in law. This is a good step for creating an enabling environment for e-mobility, and we expect the industry to continue growing. Yeah. So I would like to pose the next question to Bertha and Alex. How can industries best prepare for the growing demand for EV charging, and what strategic steps should be taken to align with the future sustainable mobility?
So I would say that they need to get ready. At least there's a regulation for all new buildings coming up to have EV charging ready here, and that's one step. So with all the industries that are coming, industrial parks that are coming, just to have the provision of that, budget for higher power as the construction is happening or at this point, so that when it comes to then transitioning them from their diesel vehicles to the electric vehicles, then charging is not so much of a constraint, because that can become a constraint. So that would be the first step that I would say they should start getting ready with.
Thank you for that. I think I will dwell within the standardization sphere. That's where my answer will be best. And one of the things I think we can start thinking about is the payment system, or do we need to standardize the payment system? I know Netherlands have a very good e-roaming e-roaming service for EV charging infrastructure. I think as we grow as an industry, those are some of the areas that we need to start addressing. I know the National Building Code has started addressing some of the issue with respect to the charging parking space allocation. And then the other one that is also that we need to think about is we have the charging infrastructure guidelines, and the guidelines they're just guidelines. They don't have the force of a law, just like a regulation can have. And then do we need? We start to now to think about: do we need to mandate the type of standard for the EV charging stations, especially the one at the public for the public that are accessible to the public? And then the other issue that we need to start thinking about as the industry grows is, of course, how do we manage the waste from the batteries that are coming from these particular e-vehicles? Is actually a big concern. And do we have facilities here locally that can be able to address that and help us solve that particular problem? Then the other one is, I think the industry needs to be more proactive in, I know they have been proactive in developing standards. I think now is the time that they need to embrace, actually, because we have developed the standards. They are there now. The industries, your role is now to start actually now implementing. We don't want to come with a stick. I think the ideal case is that you already have the carrot. We are trying to help bring clarity to the business environment, and I think players like Esak, I think you should be at the forefront of pushing and making the industries just embrace the standard or quality standards on their own without being forced by the regulator or from us CREP side, especially for the inspection of the products that are coming into the country. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this question was also posed to me. Well, I'll echo some of the points mentioned by some panelists here, but then I'll also dwell on my area, but mirroring what they've mentioned. One is for the industry to prepare, there is definitely need to invest in R&D. This is research and development. The lowest hanging fruit is end of life of batteries. You know, Knights and Apps, GIZ are supporting these studies, and I know the British government through FCDO, CREPs are also working on it through the IEC Global Impact Fund. So this is one of the areas that will need to be looked at. Then reskilling and upskilling. Okay, so capacity building. We don't need to wait until we have so many vehicles. Then that's when we start thinking about developing capacity. So I will invite you all to come to Strathmore. We had the first training on e-mobility, I think how long ago? 2 weeks ago. Yeah, but looked at an overall overview, but focused on charging infrastructure. And of course, many other institutions could also start this. Also, I think one other way is collaboration and on charging infrastructure. And standards development is key. Sometimes, and Alex can mention this, we go to standard development technical committees. You'll find only 2 e-mobility companies, which I think is unfortunate. And the other room is full of guys from government who are the policy makers actually and want to hear from the industry, right? Or now you also find academia there, and we are non-partisan, really. So partnerships are key to develop these charging hubs, for instance. This will bring out innovation, standardization. I mean, an example I have is Safaricom, the telecommunication industry. One of the reasons is it also grew very fast was some collaboration. While they compete out here, when you look at the infrastructure, they have what you call co-location. I think some of you have also seen this, where you have a base transceiver station, say owned by Safaricom, but it has equipment for Airtel and Telecom, right? And that way, all are able to grow. You get what I mean? So, in as much as they're all running different businesses, but then they have co-location with regards to infrastructure. So that partnership, I think, is key. And I welcome you all to Strathmore. We do quality research, so come and we'll do this work for you. So also, industries can prepare by coming to our institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignatius. Indeed, collaboration is key, and this brings me to my last question that I'll pose to Engineer Musonye and June. How can private sector and government collaborate to scale EV charging networks across key industry hubs and businesses?
Well, I will pick from where Ignatius talked about collaboration, and the collaboration is probably leaving out academia. We need 3 arms in what we always say, called the triple helix: government, private sector, and academia. Collaboration is in very many ways. The first one, and the most important one, is what you call the regulatory compact. Others call it quid pro quo. I don't know if that's a French word or whatever it is, but it's a bit of regulatory compact where, you know, once you regulate the industry, everyone has a role to play. So one expects the private sector to abide by the rules, strictly abide by the rules. The government needs to meet its end of the bargain. So the government says, for example, I will only allow XYZ to have their charging infrastructure here. I don't allow any other person because he is not fit to run the infrastructure. And I have prevented him by doing licensing. Then he tells you, because I have given you preferential treatment, to run the stations, these are the rules you'll have to live by. So those rules, and that's where we start getting the problem. I'll run an analogy of this company called Super Metro. You've seen it all over in the news. They were given a license and told, no, Fenwicks cannot run his bus on this road because it's not licensed. So we have given you a license to run on the road based on the following conditions. Then they break the compact. Then the government is supposed to come in with now the stick, the hammer, to hit their head. So one best thing is, and that's why governments run, by the way, why a state exists, general state, is that there is a government that sets some well agreed upon rules, then the citizens obey the rules, then they pay the taxes, then the government runs. So the same thing, we can cascade it down to the collaboration, is by obeying the rules. Number two is by what Ignatius has also talked about. When we are developing these policy instruments, these laws, these tariffs, the private sector needs to take an active role in it. From my personal experience, they don't. I've had a place where I was running a regulation for 3 good years, and only one company used to come. I got to fly to Kisumu, only one company flies to Kisumu. Then when we had the regulation, we developed we had a meeting, I think in Nairobi, and 300 guys came shouting that regulation was very bad. But I had walked around the country with only one company and not mention it in appliances, not for charging. So we need to take an active role in running the standards. In other countries where Alex has mentioned, like Australia, standards are run and housed by the private sector, not the government. So the CREPs of Australia is an NGO, so to speak. It's not even a government. So we want to move that direction. Not that we can deny him a job because he will become part of you there, but we want where the private sector is actively championing for following rules, championing for developing standards, for self-regulation, so that if we come here 10 years from now, we will not be asking the government to do anything because we'll be doing our things by ourselves. Thank you very much.
I'll add on the licensing part just a bit in terms of costs. There was a time we applied just a license for installing one of the chargers, and the price was very exaggerated, and you wonder how you'll recover even from the respective charging sessions you're going to get. So is it possible that the cost can be also customized to attract people to do the same? Because for every charger we have to pay for that. Then also collaboration between intergovernmental agencies. Let's say, for example, my charging station is along a certain road. Immediately my driver parks there to charge. The Kanjo will come, give us the 300 for charging here, for a parking fee, because they'll not consider it as a charging session. So it means some people will find it very risky to operate in some of the charging stations installed across. Then also there is the process of maybe getting the meter from KPLC, which takes quite a long time, in my opinion, which if you're to start business now, you start applying, you get somebody to come and survey the site, another person is in charge of the meter itself, another person will tell you recommendation, maybe you're not ready, you need to do upgrade things and that. It takes quite a while until you start wondering, at what point will I start getting back my money? Then also there is the aspect of financing, in as much as it's not directly fully on the government, but other institutions that can collaborate to ensure that people are able to uptake these vehicles, at the same time even invest in the charger. For example, if somebody comes in and tells the driver, I can give you this amount so that you can start to pay me as for let's say 2-3 years period, it will motivate people to come in and own, and then they pay over time. We need more awareness sessions. I think we've improved because in 2023 we are quite far, but still we need to do much more. The mobility trainings also, in as much as they're available, they're not that affordable, because I can remember there's one session that is actually 40,000 plus VAT for one person being offered by one of the private entities. So it means government has to do 1 or 2 things to ensure that it's affordable for all of us. I also appreciate that curriculums have been developed, but how soon do they kickstart so that people can enroll and continue, other than lengthening the whole period? Thank you.
Today's session has been fantastic. I'd like to thank the panelists for engaging in this conversation and for the great insights that you've given us. Clearly, captive power is also a strategic enabler to scaling e-mobility, from policy and planning to private sector innovation. The C&I space is a powerful lever for energy transition. I'd like you to give a round of applause to our panelists.